Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of March of the Machine Commander deck techs. I'm covering every legendary creature from March of the Machine's main set in no particular order, plus the extra legends from Mom Jumpstart and the special pre-release promos. And if there's interest, maybe I'll even do the non-face legends from the Mom Commander products. So if you have a request for a March of the Machine Commander you'd like to see me build, or a way you want to see me build them, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today our commander is Zimone and Dina, two of the 5 mage students from our first visit to Strixhaven on the plane of Arcavios. When the Phyrexians invaded, Professor Liliana Vess tasked them and their 3 friends with searching the Biblioplex for the Invocation of the Founders, a spell created by the Founder Dragons to protect Strixhaven. Dina and Zimone had never worked their magics together before, but they found that Zimone's theorems could be applied to Dina's spells of life and death to multiply their strength. This helped the group make it through the invaders and locate the invocation, but a completed Prismari Dean distracted them during its casting, causing Quintorius' spark to ignite and for him to planeswalk away. Even so, the invocation did drive back the main wave of attackers and allowed the students to save the school. If you've watched my arena content, you know I'm a fan of Dina, based on my avatar choice, and I really like Zimone as well, so I'm excited to share this deck with you. But before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why they're such a cool card and why I put them in charge of my deck. So whatever they ask of me, even though it's a lot for this card, I put 30 cards toward that. That's our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. We support that game plan with 30 more cards in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers just to clear the board when it's needed, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, but I almost always keep to a floor of 38 lands, sometimes I even run more, like today, so that I can always hit my land drops and I can cast my spells. So let's talk about our commander. Zimone and Dina is a 3/4 legendary human dryad, a human and a dryad, for Sultai mana, a black, a green, and a blue. It says whenever we draw our second card each turn, target opponent loses 2 life and we gain 2 life. And if we tap Zimone and Dina and sacrifice another creature, we draw a card and we may put a land card from our hand onto the battlefield tapped, and if we control 8 or more lands, we do that all over again. Just once though. So this is a pretty fun team up. Both of these characters have cool backstories. Zimone is a math prodigy who solved an advanced conjecture about the essence of the universe, and in the process rescued and redeemed her grandmother, who had sought to do the same years before. Dina is a dryad who came to Strixhaven to find a cure for the brittle blight that was draining the hope and the life energy from her glade, and while she wasn't successful in the end, she did develop her skills and confidence in the process of making a friend in Killian. At present, in the story, they're both grad students, with Dina serving as a TA to Liliana, and Zimone working on her thesis in Ravnica. And Duskmourn, not really intentionally. We'll return to Arcavios in April of 2026 for the Secrets of Strixhaven set, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of these two then. But our team up isn't just fictionally fun. This card cares about so many things: sacrifice, drain, drawing multiple cards in a turn, making land drops, having a lot of land in play. It's everything you'd expect from the conjunction of 2 powerful color pairs, and it really invokes Zimone's rabid desire to learn more and to do everything. I get the vibe that Dina is here because she's game for whatever, so she's happy to supply her Quandrix lab partner with magical energy, Witherbloom style. So because our commander wants us to do a little of everything, that's exactly what this deck is about. We have 10 cards that drain our opponents, 10 more that want lands to hit the battlefield, another 10 that reward us when we cast our second spell each turn, and even 10 that give us value when our creatures die. If that sounds like we're fitting 40 cards into a 30-card game plan, well, that's just what Mathemagic is about. We have a lot of overlap in this deck, and because most of these cards can fit into 2 or 3 of these categories, our equations have plenty of places for us to slot them in. But that's not the end of our synergies. Since about half of our lands are likely to enter thanks to our commander's ability, which puts them into play tapped, we're running more than our usual share of tapped duels to fix our mana in the process. We have ways to recur our creatures so that we can sacrifice them over and over. We have cards that care about life gain, since we're doing a bit of that. Cards that are better for us once we've gotten them into the graveyard. Cards that let us manipulate the top of our library to ensure our commander always finds what they want. And even cards that make exponential copies of themselves when we get their triggers. And in case we don't want to lose our permanence just to get our value train on track, more than a quarter of our deck gives us fodder for our sacrifices so that Zimone and Dina always have fuel to burn. Decks with triggers that cause other triggers are always fun, and this is no exception. Playing with the stack in the form of sequencing choices makes you feel like a genius. Chips of chalk flying as you fill up the blackboard. Each line is a new list of variables and relationships, balanced by every subsequent symbol we add. We intimidate our opponents by moving cards and dice around our playmat, declaring each of our steps and each of our actions like an instructor with a laser pointer. We don't see the fear in their eyes as our payoffs pile up because we're having too much fun assembling advantages and showing our work as we do. None of the pieces on our board are so vital to our game plan that our opponents even know what to remove in order to take our engine offline, and in the end, their heads are left spinning from all we've accomplished. No matter how hard they cram, the only thing they can pass is the turn. The real lesson they end up learning is that they won't make the grade. They don't even meet the prerequisites for these interdisciplinary studies. Maybe they should sign up for Summer Magic. You'll enjoy this deck if you like taking game actions that always put you ahead and always beget more, or if you don't care that the answers are in the back of the book. You know you can figure them out on your own. So as usual, this Mox field list we're going over today is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will see a considering section. It's full of cards that I considered putting in the deck, many of which are really cool, but I decided to stick with what I went with. But if you have an idea for a way you want to build this deck, that's a good place to start. Check the considering section if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one. If you want to focus more on, let's say, Landfall or on Life Drain, whatever you want to do, check that considering section because it's a good place for you to get started when you build your own Zimone and Dina deck. So we're going to start with our 4 categories of things that we're doing here, particularly with death triggers. These are all cards that will trigger when our creatures die and give us some value from it. Starting with Bastion of Remembrance. I love this card from Ikoria originally. 2 and a black for an enchantment that says, when it enters, we make a 1/1 white human soldier creature token, and whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent loses a life and we gain a life. So this is different from Zimone and Dina because they drain one opponent. One opponent will lose 2 and we'll gain 2. Bastion of Remembrance makes everyone lose 1 and we gain 1. So a little bit of life gain, a little bit of life drain or life loss for each opponent, because drain is technically they lose it and we gain it because it's based on drain life from alpha. But yeah, and it comes with a token that we can sacrifice if we need to. Next is Morbid Opportunist. 2 and a black for a 1/3 human rogue that says, whenever one or more other creatures die, draw a card. This ability only triggers once each turn. This does not say whenever one or more creatures you control die. And it does not say on each of your turns. So we want to look for any deaths that happen that aren't the Opportunist itself, because of course it doesn't trigger on itself. Any deaths that happen on our turn, which is probably going to be at least 1 every turn, since we're probably going to be sacrificing something to our commander every turn. And we'll get an extra card draw on top of the card draw we get from that sacrifice ability on our commander. But then on our opponent's turns, whether we're using a removal spell or whether they're in combat with us or with someone else, whether they're using removal spells, whatever it may be, Morbid Opportunist might even draw us a card every single turn in a turn cycle. It might not be that much, but even if it doubles up the draws on our turn, that's still pretty great. Next, from the recent Avatar The Last Airbender set, this is Beifong's Bounty Hunters. 2 a black and a green for a 4/4 human mercenary, so 4 mana for a 4/4 is already okay. It says, whenever a non-land creature you control dies, Earthbend X, where X is that creature's power. So Earthbend means one of our lands becomes a creature with haste that is still a land. It's a 0/0, but it gets a number of counters on it based on the creature who died's power, the non-land creature who died's power. And then when that land dies or goes to exile, it comes back to the battlefield tapped, so we get it back. So not only does Beifong's Bounty Hunters give us the ability to make, they're not tokens, but they are sacrificable creatures out of our lands whenever any of our creatures die, as long as those creatures weren't lands themselves. So this doesn't say non-token non-land creature. So when our tokens die, we get to Earthbend. And it also means that those Earthbent lands, when we sacrifice them, or when they otherwise die, we get them back. So we'll trigger our enters effects again if the lands have enters effects, or our landfall. So a lot of stuff is happening here. And I should mention one more thing. When you earthbend, you choose a land. You just target a land. If you do that a second time, you can choose the same land and just put more counters on it. It will remain a 0/0 creature, but you'll just put extra counters on it. So we can make a much bigger creature with this than we expect. Pretty sweet. Next is Elegy Acolyte from Edge of Eternities. 2 and double black for a 4/4 human cleric with lifelink that says whenever one or more creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, we draw a card and lose a life. So it rewards us for the combat damage we're going to be doing, although it's only 1 card and 1 life, no matter how many creatures we hit a single player with. But if we send our creatures at multiple players, then we'll get multiple triggers, assuming they do combat damage to those players. And it has a void ability. At the beginning of our end step, if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, or a spell was warped this turn, we make a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. So we get a free 2/2 artifact creature if one of our non-land permanents left the battlefield. I don't think we have anything in this deck that warps, although we might. But this essentially means as long as we sacrificed anything, or any of our things died, or anyone else's things died, then we get a 2/2 robot reward at the end of the turn. So usually we're going to get that 2/2 because at the least that we would have done probably is sacrifice the 2/2 that we made the prior turn. So we'll get another robot back. The only way this wouldn't trigger is if what we're sacrificing, and all we're sacrificing, is an earthbent land, because void only triggers if it was a non-land permanent. So not a usual death trigger, but it triggers at the end step if something died. It's not bad. Pitiless Plunderer is next from Rivals of Ixalan. 3 and a black for a pirate, a human pirate, it's a 1/4, that says whenever another creature you control dies, make a treasure. That's pretty great. All of our creatures dying, and we get a little bit of temporary ramp. Treasure's a ramp. That helps us to be able to cast all of our other spells, and in case we need to, we have a pretty good mix of colors in our mana base, but we are running a 3-color deck, so this can give us a little bit of fixing if we need it as well. In addition, I should mention, treasures leave the battlefield, so that will trigger Void, or cause the Void ability to trigger on Elegy Acolyte at the end step. Next we have Poison Tip Archer. I love this card. I played this a lot in Standard back in the day when M19 was in Standard. For 2, a black and a green, we get a 2/3 Elf Archer with Reach and Death Touch, and whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So this is each opponent. We're not gaining any life from it, but it's any creature for any reason. If they're dying on an opponent's playmat because that opponent is in combat with a different opponent, each of those creatures that dies, sorry, everyone's going to lose a life. Next is Eloise, Nephalia Sleuth. I really like this card. Eloise is 3, a blue and a black for a 4/4 legendary human rogue that says whenever another creature creature we control dies, investigate. So we make a clue. A clue is an artifact with 2 generic mana, and sacrifice it, draw a card. So this is a slow way for us to draw cards, but not a bad one, and it can trigger our commander without us having to sacrifice something if we've run out of things to sacrifice. We can just pay 2 mana, sack the clue, and we'll draw our second card, and so that will start Zimone and Dina's triggers going. And that's something we're going to get whenever we need card advantage every time another creature we control dies, which is going to happen a lot. And whenever you sacrifice a token, surveil 1. So that includes the clue token, but it also includes things like treasures, things like these robot creature tokens. Any token we sacrifice, we get to surveil. And surveil is great because it means we get to look at the top of our library, and if it's not something that we think we're going to want for Zimone and Dina's triggers when they draw us a card and let us put a land into play, then we can just put it in our graveyard. And we have a few ways, not too many, but a few ways to recur cards from our graveyard, so we don't have to be worried about like, oh, that's a cool card, I want to be able to use it, so I better not put it in the graveyard. If it's not something we can use right then, don't worry about it. There are plenty of cool cards in our deck that we're going to want to be able to use, and even if we don't see it this game, we'll see it another game. Next is Sir Conrad the Grim from Throne of Eldraine. 3 and double black for a 5/4 legendary human knight that does this. Sir Conrad deals 1 damage to each opponent whenever one of three things happen. Either any other creature dies. Doesn't have to be ours, doesn't have to be a non-token. As long as a creature has died, Sir Conrad will trigger and do a damage to everyone. If a creature is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield. So if somebody mills, for example, and they mill a creature card, those creature cards went into a graveyard, any graveyard, and they didn't go there from the battlefield, so Sir Conrad will deal 1 damage to each opponent. Or if a creature leaves our graveyard, only ours. And we have a few ways to do that, like I mentioned, but most of the time, Sir Conrad is going to trigger from creatures dying or creatures going to the graveyard from somewhere other than the battlefield. 3 different ways for Sir Conrad to do a damage to each opponent. In addition, we can pump 1 and a black into Sir Conrad and everyone will mill a card. We don't do that often in this deck, but sometimes it can be useful. If we've got extra mana and nothing to spend it on, Sir Conrad's right there for us to pump it into. So yeah, Sir Conrad is here to punish all of our opponents for anything going into the graveyard, or any creatures getting into the graveyard or leaving ours. So yeah. Next, we're running Liliana Dreadhorde General. I'm so excited to play this card, and they did reprint it in Foundations, so it's not like it's impossible to get. For 4 and double black, we get a Liliana Planeswalker with 6 loyalty that says, whenever a creature you control dies, draw a card. That's an incredible death trigger effect. Just being able to get more cards into our Sultai commanders, like our Sultai deck hand, yeah, we want that. Liliana can +1 her loyalty to make a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So this is a token we can sacrifice and get a trigger off of Eloise if we want to from sacrificing a token, but also we'll get a trigger off of Liliana because that's us having a creature we control die. Which means if we have that zombie in play and Liliana in play and our commander in play, we can trigger our commander's triggered ability with their activated ability on another player's turn. Because we're sacrificing the zombie and drawing a card here, but we'll also draw a card from Liliana for sacrificing it, which means we've drawn our second card during that turn, even though it's not our turn, and target opponent will lose 2 and we'll gain 2. Plus, we'll get all of the rest of this trigger, or this activated ability. So that's just Liliana's first loyalty ability. We can also -4 her, and each player sacrifices 2 creatures of their choice. That's not anything to sneeze at. I mean, it's everyone losing 2 creatures. We're usually going to have quite a few token creatures that we want to get rid of, or fodder creatures if you want to think of it that way. And everyone else has to lose 2, and that's not bad. And in addition, because we're sacrificing 2 creatures, we will have had 2 creatures that we control die, so we'll draw 2 cards from that. Can't forget about this. Which is to say, 2 cards, and it definitely gives us our trigger on our commander. And then finally, if we can get Liliana Dreadhorde General to 9 loyalty, then our opponents don't really care about winning the game. Because if we -9 her, each opponent chooses a permanent they control of each permanent type and sacrifices the rest. Meaning they get to keep 1 creature, 1 artifact, 1 land, 1 planeswalker, 1 battle, 1, I don't know, Kindred card? I guess they could have one of those left still. In any case, they only get 1 land. Good luck. Finally, we have a Duskmourn card. This is a room card. The way that rooms work is this. A room is a permanent card, it's an enchantment, that comes in and it has 2 doors, they're called, two halves of it. We choose one of them and we cast that based on its casting cost. So if we wanted to cast the Awakening Hall, we would be putting an 8 mana black enchantment onto the stack, and if it resolves, this card comes into play and the Awakening Hall is unlocked, it's called, and the Funeral Room is locked, meaning we treat the card as though it only has this text on it. Then at sorcery speed, whenever we want, that we could cast a sorcery, we can unlock the Funeral Room for 2 and a black, and when we do, this card now has all of this text on it. So the idea is usually we're going to be casting Funeral Room first. It's going to come in with the Funeral Room unlocked, and we have this ability, which is whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent loses a life and we gain a life, much like Bastion of Remembrance. And Awakening Hall will be locked, and we're just going to wait until later in the game when we have 8 mana to unlock it. And when we unlock it, it says when you unlock this door, return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it reanimates everything, which hopefully wins us the game for 8 mana. But in any case, this is a pretty sweet card to be able to just get an extra sort of Blood Artisty, Bastion of Remembrance ability into play for just the same amount of mana. And offers us the promise for something bigger later. So those are our death triggers. Let's talk about ways that we can drain our opponents. It's right here. So not all of these are actual life loss. Some of these are damage, but they're all about getting rid of our opponent's life, even if they aren't strict drain so much. Iridescent Vine Lasher from Bloomburrow is a single black mana for a 1/2 Lizard Assassin. With Landfall, whenever a land you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to target opponent. Only hits 1 person, but it's every time we have land come in, and a lot of the times that's going to happen multiple times per turn thanks to our commander. However, Iridescent Vine Lasher also has Offspring for 2 generic, which means when we cast this, we can pay the extra 2, so a total of a black and 2, and then when the Vine Lasher enters, it will make a token copy of itself that is a 1/1. So we'll have a 1/2 Vine Lasher and a 1/1 Vine Lasher that if you have the token for it, it's pretty cute, and they will both have this Landfall trigger. So pretty nice to be able to do 2 damage to an opponent every time land comes in, or 1 damage to 2 opponents. So yeah, Vine Lasher pretty good for us. Next, we're running original Dina from Strixhaven, Dina Soul Steeper. If you like Arena, I have an Artisan Brawl deck for Dina Soul Steeper on my channel, so check that out. I'll put the link in the video's description. But in any case, Dina is a 1/3 legendary Dryad Druid for a black and a green that says whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. Meaning, whenever we gain life from, let's say, our commander, if we've drawn our second card during the turn, each opponent will lose 2 and will gain 2, which will trigger Dina and cause each opponent to lose an additional 1. So Dina rewarding us for our life gain, because we're going to be doing a lot of it in this deck. In addition, Dina is a sacrifice outlet. For 1 and sacrifice another creature, Dina gets a power bonus equal to the power of the creature we sacrifice. This doesn't happen that often, but it can sure mess up combat math if we've got a little bit of mana and a few little 2/2 robot tokens, for example. Maybe someone attacks and they have a 5 toughness creature. Maybe we're willing to trade Dina away, and so we pay 2 mana, sacrifice 2 robots, and give her +2/+0 twice, making her a 5/3. That's a juggernaut. So yeah, Dina's pretty sweet. We've seen the Bastion of Remembrance already, of course. It will drain each opponent for 1, and we gain 1 when one of our creatures dies. Next, from Avatar, we have Raven Eagle. This is a 2/3 bird assassin. It's a bird and an assassin. Think about that. For 2 and a black, that flies. It says whenever this creature enters or attacks, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard, and if a creature card is exiled this way, create a clue token. So this is the new templating for Investigate. We're just making clues. So another extra way to make clues, and a good way for us to eat cards out of graveyards if someone's got a graveyard strategy. But whenever we draw our second card each turn, each opponent loses a life and we gain a life. So more rewards for the second card thing, and draining our opponents in the process. Retreat to Hagra is next. 2 and a black for an enchantment with Landfall. When a land we control enters, we can either give target creature +1/+0 and death touch until end of turn, which is pretty alright. Might be multiple creatures. Or each opponent loses a life and we gain a life. So this can be a great way to drain our opponents out, and this can be a great way for us to get some good attacks in. I've mentioned this before, but in case you're not familiar with the way this plays out, in Commander, you have 40 life. Even if you've lost a bunch of it, sometimes people are willing to just take damage so that they don't lose their stuff. Which means if you attack with a death touch creature, especially one that's got an extra power on it, your opponent might say, yeah, I know you're attacking me with like a 4 power or 5 power creature, but it's definitely going to trade with my blocker. And since I don't have any little 1/1 tokens I'm willing to throw away, and I don't have any like indestructible blockers, I'm going to have to lose something I really like to the death touch at the least if I block your creature. So I won't block, which means death touch has become evasion. It's meant our opponent's not blocking, so we're getting in for damage. That can be pretty sweet, even if we're not using it, just to drain out our opponents. Next is Gixian Puppeteer from the Brothers War. For 3 and a black, we get a 4/3 Phyrexian Warlock that says whenever you draw your second card each turn, each opponent loses 2 and you gain 2. So this is on top of the second card we draw that triggers our commander. So one of our opponents is going to lose 4. Each other opponent's going to lose 2, and we're going to gain 4. Pretty sweet. In addition, when the Puppeteer dies, we return another target creature card with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. I'll say this again when we talk about the Puppeteer later on, but there are 17 creatures in this deck, including our commander, that Gixie and Puppeteer can bring back. That's pretty alright. So if we get hit with a board wipe with our commander out and the Gixie and Puppeteer, this trigger will go on the stack, and we'll be able to bring our commander back if we want to. Pretty good. We've seen the Poison-Tipped Archer, causes our opponents to lose life when another creature dies. We're also running Psychosis Crawler for 5 generic mana. This is a star artifact creature Phyrexian Horror, with power and toughness each equal to the number of cards in our hand. In this deck, we have so many cards in hand all the time, because even though we're playing a lot of lands and a lot of spells, we never really run out. So we're not worried about this dying because we've lost all of the cards in our hand. And whenever we draw a card, whether it's part of our draw step, or part of one of our draw spells, or just part of our commander's activated ability where we sacrifice a creature and then draw a card, each opponent will lose a life. We've seen the other two. Sir Conrad, of course, drains our opponents, or does damage to them really, whenever one of 3 things happens, oftentimes our creature's dying, or any creature's dying. And Funeral Room does the same thing as Bastion of Remembrance, making each opponent lose a life and us gain a life whenever a creature we control dies. So that covers our drain section. Let's skip ahead to our second draw section. These are cards that we care about drawing 2 cards and giving us value from it. Emrakul's Messenger from Modern Horizons 3 is next. 1 and a blue for a 2/1 Eldrazi Fairy Rogue with flying, but also with Devoid. Devoid means even though we're spending blue mana on this card has no color. It may not be relevant, but if our opponent has a red elemental blast or something, and they want to use it to destroy the messenger, or a pyroblast and they want to counter it, or anything that cares about this card being blue, those cards won't work on it because this card has no color. It is devoid. Not likely to come up, but there it is. It also says whenever we draw our second card each turn, we make a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi Spawn creature token that has the ability, if we sacrifice it, we get a colorless mana. This is the cost of the ability on the Eldrazi Spawn. It does not require us to tap it, which means we can use this while the Eldrazi Spawn has Summoning Sickness. So every time we cast we draw our second card each turn, Emrakul's Messenger is going to give us a 0/1 that we can use to block. We can use to just have it if we want to pump it up. We can use to sacrifice to our commander if we need to get the ball rolling on their ability, or we can just sacrifice it for mana. Pretty helpful. Next is Jor-El, Morvuli Recluse. Jor-El is a really cool character. She's the Empress of Beasts. She is a 1/2 legendary human druid for 1 and a green, and she's from Dominaria, in case you're curious. Queen. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, you create a 2/2 green cat creature token. And if we pay 4 and double green until end of turn, creatures we control each have base power and toughness XX, where X is the number of cards in our hand. Oftentimes, we can get a whole bunch of cards in our hand, then activate Jor-El, and all of our creatures become 7/7s, or 8/8s, or 10/10s, and we swing in, and that's enough for us. Mischievous Recluse, good grief. Mischievous Mystic is next. This is from Foundations. It's a 2/1 human wizard for 1 and a blue. It flies, because it's got all these little fairies carrying around. And whenever we draw our second card each turn, we make a 1/1 fairy. It's a blue creature token with flying. Pretty nice. It's like a blue Thopter, if you want to think of it that way. Detective of the Month. This is so cool. 2 and a blue for a 2/3 human detective with the cheesiest of smiles. I love it. It has Ascend, which means when Detective of the Month is on the battlefield, if at that point or at any other point we have Detective of the Month in play, and we have 10 or more permanents, including our lands, our creatures, our artifacts, all of our permanents, if at any moment we have Detective of the Month and 10 permanents in play, we suddenly gain the City's Blessing. And we will have it for the rest of the game, no matter whether or not we have, at any point, fewer than 10 permanents, whether Detective of the Month goes away. Ascend is something that we get, and once we get it, we keep it the whole time. We get the City's Blessing. It doesn't do anything on its own, but cards with Ascend care about it. For example, as long as we have the City's Blessing, detectives we control can't be blocked. Now, Detective of the Month is our only detective, I think. Detective of the Month is our only detective. However, when we draw our second card each turn, we make a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token. So every turn we're drawing 2 cards, we're making more unblockable things because we're going to get the City's Blessing pretty quickly. So as long as Detective of the Month remains in play, we're going to be able to keep those tokens unblockable. And even if we have to sacrifice them to our commander, that's okay, because doing so will draw us our second card each turn, and we'll get another one. Next, another avatar card is Foggy Swamp Spirit Keeper. This is one of the avatar cards that has a character that wasn't really featured in the show. Don't really know what's going on with it, but we've got a crocodile catfish, godile, something. Anyway, for 1 a blue and a black, we get a 2/4 human druid ally with lifelink that says when we draw our second card each turn, we make a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token with this token can't block or be blocked by non-spirit creatures. So if our opponent doesn't have any spirit creatures, this is a 1/1 unblockable creature. So that's pretty good for us to sacrifice, pretty good for us to attack with, totally fine. It essentially has shadow, but for spirits, so yeah. Next is Min, Wily Illusionist, from the Adventures in the Forgotten Realms commander decks. For 1 and double blue, we get a 1/3 legendary gnome wizard that says whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 1/1 blue illusion creature token with this token gets +1/+0 for each other illusion you control. Do we have any other illusions in the deck? We don't. So similar to these detectives, we only get this sort of benefit from the illusions that Min is making for us. However, whenever an illusion we control dies, we can put a permanent with mana value less than or equal to that creature's power from our hand onto the battlefield. So a little bit of ramping things out, not too much, but a little bit. It's also very funny to me that Min looks like a cool person riding on a bear with an intellect devourer hanging out as well for some reason. What a strange illusion. Next up is Raven Eagle. Oh, we've already seen Raven Eagle, of course. It lets us drain each opponent for 1, and we gain 1 when we draw our second card each turn. Thopter Fabricator is next. I mentioned the Mischievous Mystic a moment ago. Thopter Fabricator is a 4/4 flying artifact vehicle for 2 and a blue. It crews for 2, and whenever we draw our second card each turn, we make a 1/1 Thopter with flying. So this is a 3 mana card that makes 1/1s when we 3 1/1 flyers when we draw our second card. Just like the Mystic is a 2 mana flyer that makes 1/1 flyers when we draw our second card. So this is good redundancy, but also this is a bigger creature once we've crewed it, and it's not a creature until we crew it, so it's not vulnerable to creature removal until then. So a pretty good balance there between these two friends. We've seen the Gixian Puppeteer. It lets us, each opponent loses 2 life and we gain 2 life whenever we draw our second card each turn. And last in this section is Homunculus Horde. 3 and a blue for a 2/2 Homunculus that says whenever we draw our second card each turn, create a token that's a copy of this creature. This is from Foundations. Meaning, we do this on 1 turn and we get a copy of the Horde. Then the next turn, we'll draw our second card and we get a copy of both Homunculus Hordes we have in play, the original and the token we made the prior turn. So now we have 4 Homunculus Hordes. And if we do it again the next turn, 8. We can always eat one of them to our commander, but that's fine. We'll get lots and lots more. So that covers our second draw section. Last of the sections in our game plan here is Landfall. We've seen the Iridescent Vine Lasher. It and its offspring token will deal a damage to an opponent every time one of our lands comes into play. We're running Bloodghast. Bloodghast is a 2/1 vampire spirit for double black. It can't be blocked, or it can't block rather, and it has haste as long as an opponent has 10 or less life. This is not likely to happen in a commander game, but you never know. It also has Landfall. Whenever a land we control enters, you may return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is great. It means we can sacrifice the Bloodghast to our commander, then draw a card and put a land we control, or a land in our hand, onto the battlefield tapped. The Bloodghast at that point is in the graveyard, since we sacrificed it as part of the activation for that ability, which means that land comes in and the Bloodghast comes right back into play immediately. We can't block with it, but we can sure keep getting it back over and over as long as we have land to play or to put into play with our commander. So we always have something we can sacrifice to our commander to get the ball rolling. Springheart Nantuko. Love this card. Modern Horizons 3, it was a good pre-release for me with this card. A 1 and a green for a 1/1 enchantment creature insect monk. And I'll talk about Bestow in a moment. It has Landfall and a big bit of text. What it essentially says is this. Landfall, make a 1/1 green insect creature token. However, because it has Bestow means we can cast this rather than as a creature, as an enchantment aura. So we enchant another creature with the Springheart Nantuko. And the idea is when that creature dies, the Nantuko will fall off and just be a creature itself. And while it is an aura, it gives the enchanted creature +1/+1, and the rest of this ability applies. It basically means this. Whenever a land we control enters, we can pay 1 and a green as long as the Nantuko is enchanting another creature. And if we pay that 1 and a green, instead of making a 1/1 insect, we make a token that's a copy of the enchanted creature. So that's pretty sweet. And if we don't pay that, or if the Nantuko is not enchanting something, we just make an insect. So we're going to get a token no matter what if the Nantuko's in play. It's always going to be a green insect unless the Nantuko is currently an aura, currently enchanting a creature, and we pay the 1 and a green as part of the landfall trick. So all of that happens, and we get a copy of whatever it's enchanting. If any of that doesn't happen, we get a 1/1 insect instead. So the Nantuko is very good. Next we have Retreat to Coral Helm. 2 and a blue for an enchantment with landfall that says whenever a land we control enters, choose to either tap or untap target creature or scry 1. Scry 1 is great because it sets up our commander for their next double draw, for drawing something into our hand that we hope is maybe a land that we can put into play so that we can get up to 8 lands so that we can draw another one and maybe put another land into play. But even without the Scry 1, we might just run this 3-mana enchantment for this first ability because if we activate our commander, we have to tap them. So if we're able to sacrifice a creature with our commander by tapping our commander, we'll draw a card, put a land into play, trigger Retreat to Coral Helm's landfall ability, and untap our commander so that we can do it all again this same turn. Pretty great. We can do it over and over if we want to in the same turn, assuming we have enough creatures to do so, and land to be able to play to trigger the landfall ability. We have another retreat. We've already seen Retreat to Hagra, how it can either make each opponent lose a life and we gain a life when we have landfall, or make target creature have +1/+0 and get death touch till end of turn. We saw the Homunculus Horde, but here's the Scoot Swarm. 2 and a green for a 1/1 insect that says landfall. When a land we control enters, we make that same kind of 1/1 green insect creature token that the Springheart Nantuko makes. Unless, when that land enters, we then control 6 or more lands. Because if that's the case, instead we make a copy of the Scoot Swarm. So this absolutely gets out of hand. Because we play our Scoot Swarm and then we play our 6th land, let's say. We get a copy of the Scoot. Or let's play our 5th land, let's say. Scoot will make a 1/1 green insect. We then sacrifice that to Zimone and Dina, draw a card, put a land into play. We now have 6 lands in play and we make a second Scoot. If we had 8 lands in play, we'd get to repeat that again, and the original Scoot and the copy both make a copy if we put another land into play. And we'll just keep making more and more and more Scoots as we go through the game. This will 100% overrun our opponents eventually, because if you got 40 life and 10 blockers, it doesn't matter how strong those blockers are if I have 50 creatures, and it's not hard to get up to 50 Scoots. So yeah, this is sort of a must kill at commander tables, which means you want to make sure you play this when you can play a land right after it, and then hopefully trigger Zimone and Dina and basically end up with at least 4 Scoots in play on the turn you cast it. So if you can't do that, that's okay. Your opponents don't always have removal for it, but you want to make sure that the Scoot doesn't just sit there without any copies if you can help that, because it's definite removal magnet for that. Next up is Tireless Tracker. I was going to put Tireless Provisioner in this deck as well, so let's talk about the tracker first. 2 and a green for a 3/2 Human Scout with Landfall. When a land you control enters, investigate. So you make another way for us to make clue tokens. And whenever you sacrifice a clue, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So it doesn't matter if we're sacrificing that clue to its inherent ability or any other way, which is generally it's the inherent ability that we're using in this deck. But if we do, we'll make the Tireless Tracker bigger. If you want, you could put in Tireless Provisioner in addition or instead. I think the Tracker is better in this deck, but Tireless Provisioner is the same cost, and it's got a landfall ability whenever land you control enters, either make a food or make a treasure token. Those treasure tokens can really help. The food tokens can also help for a little bit of life gain. But I feel like if we have tokens in here, clues are the best for us because they let us spend 2 mana and sacrifice them to draw a card which will trigger our commander on our turn, or to maybe sacrifice 2 clues and trigger our commander's triggered ability on other players' turns. So yeah, I think clues are a little more valuable to us in this deck, but Tireless Provisioner is also a good card. Tatyova Benthic Druid. This is kind of everything we want to do in this deck. 3, a green, and a blue for a 3/3 legendary Merfolk Druid with Landfall. When one of your lands enters, you gain a life and draw a card. That's all it takes. Just land draws you a card, which triggers our commander if they hadn't already triggered this turn. Maybe we activate our commander on another player's turn, which means we'll sacrifice something, draw a card, maybe put a land into play. If we put the land into play, it triggers Tatyova, which draws us a second card, so that's our second card that turn, which triggers our commander to do 2 damage to someone, or have them lose 2 life rather, and we gain 2. Anyway, Tatyova is one of the 5+, Simic cards in our deck that really helps our commander go off. And what's especially nice about Tatyova is if an opponent uses a removal spell on her, that's kind of fine with us because she's really helpful to us, but it's also a 5-mana 3/3 uncommon that was doing a lot for us, but not doing stuff that we can't sort of do on our own. So yeah, if they use a removal spell on Tatyova and then the next turn we play a Scoot Swarm, they're going to be so sad they didn't hang on to that removal spell. Next up is Aisi, Tyrant of the Gyre Strait, rather. Or just Gyre Strait. I can say this name, Aisi, Tyrant of Gyre Strait. There it is. It's a big serpent. 5/5 legendary serpent for 4, a green and a blue, that says you may play an additional land on each of your turns. So if we've got a bunch of extra lands in our hand, go ahead and play them and we'll get landfall triggers from Aisi. Landfall, whenever a land you control enters, you may draw a card. We're probably going to. It is a may, we don't have to, but in all likelihood, we're going to draw a card. And if it's another land, we can do it again. Yeah, this is pretty great. Good ways to trigger our commander and just keep the party rolling. Finally, this is an expensive enchantment, but I really like it, and it's in Foundations, it's very inexpensive, and it gives us so much value. Primeval Bounty is 5 and a green for an enchantment that says, whenever you do something, you get something. When you cast a creature spell, make a 3/3 beast creature token. When you cast a non-creature spell, put 3 1/1 counters on a creature you control. And when you have a land enter, gain 3 life. So of course, this is giving us that landfall trigger, but it's also rewarding us by making beasts that we can sacrifice if we need to. And it's making our creatures bigger, which might even be tokens that we're pumping up. So our opponents are like, well, they're getting a lot of value from, I don't know, Tatyova, but they also have this 10/10 beast over there, because they made the beast and then cast some non-creature spells. Which one do I remove? The big threat or the repeatable value engine? Obviously the answer is the value engine most of the time, but Primeval Bounty just rewards us for playing the game, and we're going to just continue to play the game. So that covers our landfall. We've got a lot of cards that supplement our game plan, but before we get into them, we're going to talk about these cards that support it. Starting with our card advantage section, which, as usual, I have tagged simply with the word draw. It doesn't mean that all of these cards actually draw us a card, although in this deck I think they usually do, simply because we care about draw itself for our commander, but just worth noting, I just use this to represent card advantage in general. So we're running Skull Clamp. For a single generic mana, it's an equipment that equips for 1 and gives the equipped creature +1/-1, which might kill the creature you put it on, and you might think that that's a disadvantage, but whenever the equipped creature dies, we draw 2 cards. So once we cast Skull Clamp, let's say we've made a Thopter, a 1/1 flying artifact creature token. For a single mana, and sacrifice the Thopter, we'll draw 2 cards, because we'll equip this to the Thopter, that will make it into a 2/0, which will kill it, and when it dies, we draw 2, which will trigger our commander, if we haven't already triggered them this turn. So Skull Clamp is a way for us to get an awful lot of value out of our deck. We can also do something like this. Remember those 2/2 cat tokens that Jor-El makes? We equip Skull Clamp to one of them, and then activate Zimone and Dina, sacrifice that token, and we get a trigger before we even get our commander's ability resolving from Skull Clamp, because that token's died, so we draw 2 cards, which will trigger Zimone and Dina. And then we still get the activated ability of Zimone and Dina, where we draw a card and we can put a land into play, tapped, etc. So Skull Clamp gives us the ability to turn our extra card per turn that we're usually getting from this deck into 3 extra cards per turn for a single mana. Pretty great. Baleful Strix, gotta love this card. Blue and a black for a 1/1 artifact creature bird. It has flying, it has death touch, and when it enters, we draw a card. 2 mana to draw a card and thereby trigger our commander is pretty great. And it leaves behind a 1/1 flying, death touching artifact creature. That's just so awesome. And the Nilsham art, untouchable. Love this card. Growth Spiral is next, just because our commander's ability is a little bit like Growth Spiral. For a green and a blue, we get an instant that says draw a card. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. It doesn't say tapped, so if that land would have come in untapped, it comes in untapped. So this is a great way for us to just 2 mana trigger our commander, of course, much like we would with the Baleful Strix. And if we happen to get a land, we can put that into play as well and maybe get a little bit more landfall. Because this is an instant, we can trigger our draws or our second draw triggers or our landfall triggers on other players' turns, which may be something we want. Growth Spiral is very flexible for this. And I usually run the Strixhaven Mystical Archive arts for my cards that were in it, just because they're amazing. But you've got to in a Zimone and Dina deck. They're from Strixhaven. We've seen the Morbid Opportunist, draws us a card only once each turn, but it's anyone's turns, as long as any creature dies besides it. Pretty good. We're running Phyrexian Arena, because it's terrific in this deck. For 1 and double black, we get an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and you lose a life. So it costs us 1 life to draw a card, but it doesn't actually, because our commander will say, okay, you drew a card in your upkeep, and now for our draw step, hey, we just drew 2 cards. Let's gain 2 life and do 2 and have an opponent loses 2 life. So we've lost a life, but then we gained 2, and an opponent has lost 2, and we've already triggered our commander for that turn. So Phyrexian Arena doubles our just automatic draws, helps our commander. It's obvious why we want this. Raven Eagle, of course, draws us a card by creating a clue token when we exile a card from a graveyard, if we exile a creature card, and of course it will do that exiling when it enters or attacks. Sultai Charm is Sultai mana. It's a black, a green, and a blue for an instant that lets us choose to either destroy a monocolored creature, so a creature of only 1 color. Specifically, that doesn't mean a colorless creature, because colorless is not a color, obviously. So like, if someone's got a Sire of 7 Deaths or a Solemn Simulacrum of some sort, can't get rid of it because it does not have any colors. But as long as that creature is only 1 color, and that's just the color, not the color identity, we can kill it with Sultai Charm. We can also destroy an artifact or an enchantment, or we can draw 2 cards and discard a card. The discarding a card is not superlative for us in this deck, although we do have a few ways to bring our cards back from the graveyard. But being able to draw 2 is pretty nice, especially at instant speed, because we can do it on an opponent's turn and thereby trigger our commander in the process. We've seen the Tireless Tracker, which gives us the landfall ability to make clues, which draws cards. Next is Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, one of the absolute best animations on Magic Arena, and a friend of mine says it looks like he's about to just slurp up a hot dog, so I'll never be able to forget that. 1, a green, and a blue for a 6/6 Legendary Elder Giant. except that when Uro enters, sacrifice it unless it escaped, because it has an escape ability. It also says whenever Uro enters or attacks, you gain 3 life, draw a card, and you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So essentially, this is Growth Spiral for an extra mana that also gains us 3 life. So that's pretty alright, because it comes in and immediately sacrifices itself, but we do gain 3, draw a card, and we can put a land into play. That's alright. But Uro also says escape for double green and double blue and exile 5 other cards from your graveyard, which means while Uro is in our graveyard, if we pay double green, double blue, and we exile 5 other cards from our graveyard, we can cast Uro from our graveyard for that cost. Then Uro will enter, and we will not sacrifice it because it has escaped. It will enter, gain us 3 life, draw us a card, let us put a land into play, and then once it doesn't have Summoning Sickness, we can attack with it, and it will do the same thing again. Uro gives us an awful lot of value. It's crazy that it's only $3 right now. So, we've seen the Elegy Acolyte, which draws us a card and loses us a life whenever one or more creatures we control deal combat damage to a player. I mentioned the Sad Robot a moment ago. Here is Solemn Simulacrum. For 4 generic mana, we get an artifact creature Golem. It's a 2/2, and it says when it enters, we may Rampant Growth. We search our library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Pretty good for us. Gives us an extra land in play, so that's just ramp. It also triggers our Landfall. Seems good. And when it dies, we may draw a card. So if we sacrifice this to Zimone and Dina, we're going to draw a card from its own death trigger, and draw a card from our commander from activating that ability. Notable, this is a death trigger. I didn't put it in the death triggers section because it's its own death trigger. So, yeah, just so you know, those death trigger sections about getting repeatable value from things dying. Like Eloise, for the sacrifice a creature token, or sacrifice a token ability. We've seen Eloise already. Eloise can draw us cards by investigating, making clues. Tatiova lets us draw cards and gain life whenever lands enter. Aesi draws us cards when lands enter and lets us play extra land. We've seen Liliana, who draws us cards whenever our creatures die, but let's look at Garruk Cursed Huntsman, which is very sad that they're next to each other because this is the specifically cursed version of Garruk, cursed by Liliana's Chainveil, or by the Chainveil, well, Liliana had it. Anyway, sorry to make y'all stand next to each other. For 4, a black and a green, we get a legendary Garruk Planeswalker with 5 loyalty, and no plus abilities. Garruk, we can 0 him to create 2 black and green wolf creature tokens with, when this token dies, put a loyalty counter on each Garruk you control. So that means Garruk doesn't get pluses, Garruk makes wolves, and then when the wolves die, Garruk gets loyalty off of it. So this is a great way for us to plus Garruk, make 2 wolves, sacrifice one of them to our commander, which will put this trigger on the stack and put a counter on Garruk, a loyalty counter on Garruk, and we get all the value we would have gotten off of sacrificing that creature from our commander. In addition, we can -3 Garruk to just destroy target creature, draw a card. That draws us a card, that's pretty good. It blows something up, it's -3, we can do it the moment he comes in, and then just start pumping out wolves if we want to. Finally, we can -6 Garruk to get an emblem with creatures you control, get +3/+3, and have trample. This is a terrific finisher for us, and it's not hard for us to get to it either, because we play Garruk, we make 2 wolves, we protect Garruk until the next turn, and right before that next turn, we sacrifice 1 wolf to our commander, go to the next turn, sacrifice the other wolf to our commander. Garruk now has 7 loyalty, we -6 him, and Garruk gets to survive, and all of our creatures get this emblem. We might be able to get it twice, probably not, but you never know. So, those are our ways to draw cards. Let's talk about our acceleration section, which again I've just shorthand tagged as ramp here. You know Sol Ring. It costs 1, it's an artifact that taps for 2 colorless. That's all that you need to say about it. It's super powerful, put it in your deck. Especially a deck that has so many cards we want to cast as this deck, and is a little bit mana intensive, like color intensive. Sol Ring is still worth running. Arcane Signet is the same. It's a 2 mana rock, so it's a 2 mana for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color into your commander's color identity. So in this deck, it makes blue or black or green. This is a 2 mana untapped rock for 3 colors. Yeah, of course we're running that. Emrakul's Messenger. When we draw our second card each turn, we make an Eldrazi spawn, which we can sacrifice immediately if we want to, or whenever we feel like it, to make colorless mana. That's good ramp. Farseek is next. 1 and a green for a sorcery that says search your library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain card, put that onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So this is just a better version for us of Rampant Growth. It's 1 and a green, it finds a land, puts it on the battlefield tapped, but it can find islands and swamps, as well as plains and mountains. The fact that these are written on the card does not change the color identity of the card. It just means that we're able to find islands and swamps. So if we go and find a dual land, something that is an island and a forest, for example, then we can put that onto the battlefield tapped. It probably comes in tapped anyway. And now we've fixed our mana a little bit better than just getting something that was a basic island. Although we can get a basic if we want. We have a few of those in the deck. We've seen Growth Spiral. Lets us put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. Doesn't say tapped, so might be good. And then we have Nature's Lore. Nature's Lore is basically Farseek, but in reverse. 1 and a green for a sorcery that lets us search for a forest card, then put that on the battlefield on the battlefield and shuffle. It does not come in tapped. So if we find a forest card that's either a basic forest or a dual typed card with multiple types, including forest, that would not come in tapped, then it gets into the battlefield untapped, and we don't have to tap it for green. As long as it's a forest, it doesn't matter what else it is. Similar to as long as it's an island or a swamp, it doesn't matter what else it is for Farseek. So Farseek brings a land in tapped, Nature's Lore untapped, which is why Farseek is 60 cents and Nature's Lore is $3.50. But both are great in this deck, as are Rampant Growths, quote unquote. Next is Awakening Zone. 2 and a green for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, you may create an Eldrazi spawn. It's the same as the one that's made by Emrakul's Messenger, but we just get it for free at the start of our upkeep. So this is sort of like a bonus mana every turn, and also a bonus token creature that we can use as sacrifice fodder for our commander. So use it for mana, use it to activate our commander's activated ability, whatever we need, 3 mana, and we get it every turn. Sort of like 3 mana for Phyrexian Arena gives us that value every turn. Pretty good either way. We've seen Min, Wily Illusionist. It doesn't let us ramp traditionally the way that a lot of these do by making mana, but it does let us, whenever one of its illusion tokens die, put a permanent directly into the battlefield if that permanent's mana value is less than or equal to the illusion's power. And so if we were able to draw our second card each turn while Min's in play several different times, we're going to get a lot of illusions, and then hopefully let them die or just sacrifice them to power out things without having to pay mana for those things at all. Pretty good. In addition, I should mention, you can put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to the creature's power into play. That permanent card might be a land. It has mana value of 0, so yeah. We've seen Uro. Uro enters and attacks, and we draw a card. We can put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. We also gain 3 life, so a little bit of growth spiraling there. Next is Binding the Old Gods. This is one of my favorite sagas of all time. It's from Kaldheim. 2, a black and a green for Saga. If you haven't seen sagas before, this is an enchantment, and here's how it works. When it enters, and at the start of your first main phase, you put a lore counter on it. It then triggers an ability based on the number of lore counters it has on it. So when it enters, you put a lore counter on it, and it triggers this first ability. Start of your next main phase, your next pre-combat main phase, you get a second lore counter, and it triggers the second ability. And then once it triggers the last ability on it, and that trigger has left the stack, you then sacrifice it. So it tells a little story, and we get 3 little effects over the course of 3 turns. But they're not that little because it's a 4-mana saga. The first one is destroy target non-land permanent an opponent controls. That's great removal. Kill anything but a land. Love it. The second is search your library for a forest, put on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. This is sort of like Nature's Lore and Farseek had a baby. Sort of the worst of both in a way, because it only finds forests and it does put it on the battlefield tapped. But again, we can find a dual typed card, a dual typed land. If one of those types is forest, we can find it and put it on the battlefield tapped, and we can just find one that would have come in tapped anyway, so we're not losing out on the possibility of untapped duels for elsewhere in our deck. Finally, the third ability is creatures you control gain death touch until end of turn. In all honesty, I've played Binding the Old Gods so many times just for these first 2 abilities, just as a solid removal spell to kill the scariest thing on the battlefield that then ramps me a little bit. That's pretty good. But if we are going wide, and in this deck often we are with all of our token generation, creatures we control gaining Death Touch can, like I said before, be a form of evasion. It probably won't if we're attacking with everything, in which case it's kind of a form of board wipe. So yeah, Death Touch is really powerful, even if we don't care about it. We've seen the Pitiless Plunderer. It lets us make treasures anytime one of our creatures die. Our other creatures, I should say. Sad Robot, of course, rampant growths us when it enters. AC lets us play extra lands on each of our turns. That's good acceleration. Now we have another Planeswalker. This is Vraska Relic Seeker from Ixalan. 4 a black and a green, so the same cost as Garruk, Cursed Huntsman, for a 6 loyalty Vraska Planeswalker. We can +2 her to make a 2/2 black pirate creature token with Menace, so a little bit of an evasive threat, but also a little bit of fodder for us to sacrifice to our commander if we want. We can also destroy an artifact, creature, or enchantment for -3, and as a process, make a treasure. So Vraska makes us a treasure when we blow something up, as opposed to Garruk drawing us a card when we blow something up. But Garruk can hit only creatures, Vraska can also hit artifacts or enchantments, so pretty good either way. And if we get Vraska up to 10 loyalty, which I guess we could if we can defend her, then we can -10 her, and one of our opponents will become life total of 1. Which means all we have to do then is trigger our commander and target that player, and they will lose 2 life, and therefore the game. So pretty sweet with Vraska. Finally, we have Beledros Witherbloom. This is the dragon, the Elder Dragon, I should say, that founded the College of Witherbloom on the plane of Strixhaven. Strixhaven, the university, was founded by 5 founder dragons, as we talked about. Beledros Witherbloom is one of them. So for 5 a black and a green, we get a 4/4 legendary Elder Dragon with flying that says at the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 black and green pest. These are the pests from Strixhaven. It's a creature token that says when it dies, gain a life. So that's pretty sweet for us, gaining a little bit of life, helping us out with things like original Dina Soul Steeper, giving us tokens that we'll gain life off of, in addition to all the other stuff we're getting from them when we sacrifice them to Zimone and Dina. Lots of good stuff, and that happens at the beginning of each upkeep, not each of our upkeeps. So each turn cycle with 3 opponents, we're going to end up with 4 pests if we didn't sacrifice them along the way. In addition, Beledros is in the ramp section. And the reason for that is if we pay 10 life, we untap all of our lands, but only once each turn. So this can happen at instant speed, and suddenly we have all of our mana back. We could have gotten a whole bunch of ramp effects, from Farseek to playing tap lands to getting to play additional lands with AEC, or even more lands with Growth Spiral, or even more lands with our commander, maybe 2 lands from that, and then we pay 10 life and untap all of them and keep taking our turn. That's crazy. Or we can do this on our opponent's turn when it appears we're tapped out, and it looks like, well, we could lose 10 life from this, but we're maybe going to lose the game if we don't have access to mana to cast our interaction spells now. So yeah, Beledros Witherbloom, very nice for us. When we need that mana, we've got it available to us, especially since we're gaining so much life from things like these pests, from our commander's triggered ability, and so forth. That covers our acceleration section. Let's talk about interaction, which again I've just shorthanded as removal. Pest Infestation used to be a little more expensive than this. I'm glad it's not anymore. This is more of the little pesties that we talked about with Beledros. For double X and a green, we have a sorcery that says destroy up to X target artifacts and or enchantments, and create twice X 1/1 black and green pest creature tokens with when this token dies you gain 1 life. So essentially it is for a green, and then for every 2 mana we spend beyond that, we destroy an artifact or an enchantment, and everything we destroyed, we get 2 pests out of it. That's the way to think of it. So yeah. It's kind of worded in a strange way, but that's how you've got to look at it. You spend 2 mana in addition to the green, and for every 2 mana you spend but beyond that green, you blow something up. And everything you blow up makes 2 pests fall out that you get to keep. Tragic Slip is next. Tragic Slip is a single black for an instant that says target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. And if a creature died this turn already, instead, they get -13/-13. So this kills most anything. It can even kill indestructible creatures. And there is a built-in way for something to have died this turn, which is us having this in our hand and waiting until we want to hit something with it to activate our commander. We sacrifice a creature. Even with our commander's ability on the stack, we can respond to it with Tragic Slip and kill something else with -13/-13. Tear Asunder is next. This is from Dominaria United, originally. Yeah. For 1 and a green, we have an instant that exiles an artifact or enchantment, but if we pay an additional 1 and a black as its kicker cost, so for a total of 2, a black and a green, then we get to exile a non-land permanent instead. So this is just better naturalize anyway. It exiles the artifact or enchantment for 1 and a green, and if we're willing to spend 4 mana, we get to exile any non-land permanent. Which is great, because that's the same cost as Binding the Old Gods. It's hitting the same kind of permanent, but it's exiling instead of destroying. Pretty sweet. And it's an instant speed. We gotta have a blue removal spell, so here's Imprisoned by the Moon. 2 and a blue for an aura that enchants a creature, land, or planeswalker, and it makes that permanent into a land with tap to add colorless mana, and it loses all other card types and abilities. So we lock down often an opponent's biggest, scariest creature, their most valuable creature, the thing they're getting the most out of, or even just their commander. We turn that permanent into a land that taps for colorless. So they're going to have to find a way to either sacrifice one of their own lands, to remove our aura to get it back. Yeah, oftentimes this locks down someone's commander, and there's just nothing they can do about it, and that's pretty good. We've seen Sultai Charm, how it can either destroy a monocolored creature or an artifact or an enchantment. Binding the Old Gods, as I mentioned, can destroy a non-land permanent opponent controls. Tragic Slip, we talked about giving -13/-13, but here's a battle. Invasion of Innistrad. So if you haven't seen a battle before, I'll make this quick. Battles are permanents. They're sort of like an enchantment in a way, but they're their own special thing. You pay the cost, it enters, and when it does, or as it does, you choose an opponent who gets to defend it. They will defend it the same way they would defend a planeswalker that they control, but we control this battle. Anyone else at the table can attack that battle, but they cannot. And then when the battle takes combat damage, or takes any damage at all really, it loses defense counters, of which Invasion of Innistrad comes in with 5, much like planeswalkers lose loyalty when they take damage. And when a planeswalker loses all of its loyalty, it goes to the graveyard. When a battle has been defeated, where it's lost all of its loyalty to that damage, instead it goes to exile, and then we are allowed at that very moment, as at instant speed, to cast it transformed. We don't have to pay any mana for it. We just cast it, and it would come in as this enchantment. So the idea is you play Invasion of Innistrad, you choose someone else to defend it, and then we attack Invasion of Innistrad, or we get our other opponents to attack it too, I guess, until it's attacked down to 0, at which point we get to cast this enchantment for free. Pretty sweet. But in addition, it comes in and it has an enters trigger. So for 2 and double black, we get this siege with flash. And when it enters, target creature and opponent controls get -13/-13 until end of turn. So it's the same effect as the Morbid Tragic Slip. And even though this is a permanent, it has flash. So this is a 4 mana, basically kill anything, instant speed spell. And then once we attack it down, it flips over into Deluge of the Dead. When it enters, which is to say, when this side enters, when we cast it from this side, it will come in and make 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So we've got things to block with, or things to sacrifice to our commander. We can also pay 2 and a black to exile a card from any graveyard, and if it was a creature card, we make another one of those zombies. So this is a great other way for us to eat cards out of our graveyard opponents, like our opponent with a graveyard deck, eat it out of their graveyard, and make more tokens, and then sacrifice those tokens to our commander if we want. Shriekmaw is next. Love Shriekmaw. 4 and a black for a 3/2 elemental with fear, meaning it can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and or black creatures. So if an opponent's got a creature that is black and white, it can block Shriekmaw because it's black. But if they've got a creature that's just red, it can't block Shriekmaw unless it's also an artifact creature. Doesn't matter what color the artifact creature is, It just, if it's an artifact or it's black, it can block. Otherwise, no. You get it. Fear is a longer precursor to Menace, which is a little more clean. Shriekmaw says, when it enters, we can destroy a non-artifact, non-black creature. So anything that could block Shriek, or that could not be blocked by Shriekmaw, we can destroy when Shriekmaw comes in. So that's pretty alright, but a 3/2 that kills something with a little bit of evasion for 5 is not ideal, except for the fact that it has an evoke cost. Shriekmaw, we can evoke for 1 and a black. Evoke means when it enters, we sacrifice it right away. So it will enter and have 2 triggers go on the stack. The evoke trigger, which means we sacrifice it, and its other enters trigger, which means we destroy something. And since they happen at the same time, and we control them both, we can put them on the stack at the same time. So what we do, even though it doesn't really matter what order we do this in, the reason Shriekmaw's in the deck is for us to either cast it for 5 and have it destroy something when it comes in and we can just attack with it, or evoke it for 2, have it enter, and when its triggers go on the stack, sacrifice it to Zimone and Dina. It did enter, so it does get this trigger on the stack, and then we sacrifice it before the evoke trigger sacrifices it. Then it doesn't matter that that the evoke trigger still wants us to sacrifice it and it's no longer on the battlefield. We've just gotten a bunch of value out of it from Zimone and Dina, and we've still gotten its removal ability from entering. Garrett Cursed Huntsman lets us destroy a creature and draw a card. Liliana lets us cause every player to sacrifice 2 creatures, which does include us, but it hits everyone. That's maybe 6 creatures from our opponents. And Vraska lets us destroy an artifact, creature, or enchantment and make a treasure. All of these are their minus abilities, so we may only get that once, but Sultai Charm only gets us to destroy 1 thing for its value. These Planeswalkers may stick around. So that covers our removal section. Let's take a look at our Wraths. We've actually got 3 cards that count as Wraths in this deck. Liliana is likely not going to happen because it's this -9. But if it happens, cool. That's very powerful. It's likely going to win us the game, but we're not counting on it as a Wrath. I've just put it in here to remind us that it does count as one. Aetherize is our first Wrath, reprinted in Foundations. 3 and a blue for an instant that says return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. Meaning if we're getting attacked by an opponent, we bounce all their creatures, and then it just skips through the rest of combat because there aren't any more attacking creatures, and we're in combat. So Aetherize isn't a permanent board wipe, but it only needs to be a board wipe for now. It's great if we can do this when the opponent is tapped out, so they can't recast any of those creatures the same turn, but it doesn't matter. As long as we're able to stop ourselves from being killed, Aetherize is doing its job. And what's likely is they won't be able to deploy everything again. Maybe not at all, because some of them might have been tokens, so they're just gone. So that means that it's less likely for them to be able to block us if we then attack them on our turn, since this is instant speed. However, this is instant speed, which means we can cast it on other players' turns when they're attacking players other than us. Let's say opponent A attacks opponent B, we can say, hey, opponent B, I will save you from opponent A. But if I do, you have to swing at them and leave me alone for a turn. They might say, yeah, I'll go with it. And we can Aetherize all those attacking creatures, and then it passes to opponent B, and hopefully they hold up their end of the bargain. We can be a little political with this. It's especially nice if we make that deal when opponent A is attacking opponent B and us. We can say, hey, opponent B, I can save you from those cards that are coming at you. But I need, because I'm gonna just I'm gonna deal with the ones coming at me in my own way. I can save you from the ones coming at you. Will you agree to go after opponent A and then not come at me? You know, for another turn cycle or 2? They might say yes. Why are you going to just take the damage? You just say, don't worry about it. The deal is I help you with your things. It doesn't matter then that we cast Aetherize and it also helps us. So you can be a little tricky with this if you want to. But in any case, Aetherize is good politically. It's good for just us. Yeah, it helps out. We also have Azuri's Predation. This is an expensive Wrath, 5 and triple green for a sorcery that essentially does this. We count up all the creatures that our opponents control. We make a 4/4 green Phyrexian Beast creature token for each of those creatures, and each of our tokens fights one of those creatures. So every creature our opponents control is getting fought by a 4/4 beast. And if any of our beasts survive that, we get to keep them. Yeah. So a pretty nice way for us to do this is to do it pre-combat. And so then we're attacking, and whatever creatures that our opponents retain have 4 damage marked on them, which means they may not survive this. It's also pretty nice to do this post-combat. We attack with a bunch of our creatures die, and hopefully trade with our opponent's creatures. But whichever creatures our opponents retain after all that have damage marked on them from our creatures. So then we cast Azuri's Predation, add 4 more damage to each of those, and even if that kills off some of our beasts, that's okay. It means that it kills off a lot of our opponent's creatures, and we're in a pretty good position because we've probably got a few beasts left over that we can keep using. So yeah, either way, an 8 mana spell sets us up in a pretty good position. I guess that's not surprising, but it's a pretty fun wrath. So that covers our support section. Let's look at a few more sections that go into ways of supplementing our game plan. We're going to start here with our fodder section, which I know you're thinking, there's 27 cards in here. Why didn't you just make this the game plan? Because it's not. This is giving us ways to empower our commander, and a lot of these cards are in those other sections. But it's worth looking at these as what they do for our deck, and then what they do to supplement that first section of our deck. So Pest Infestation, of course, is an interaction spell. It's a removal spell. But it does create pests, which are fodder for Zimone and Dina to sacrifice. Bloodghast, as we saw before, is just built-in fodder. You sacrifice this, put a land into play, it comes back for us, we can do it again. Emrakul's Messenger makes the Eldrazi Spawn tokens, which we can use for mana, but also sacrifice to Zimone and Dina. Jor-El, when we draw our second card, makes us a cat. Mischievous Mystic, when we draw our second card, makes us a flying fairy. Spring-Hearted and Tuco, when we get Landfall, we get an insect, or maybe we get a copy of whatever it's enchanting, if we're willing to pay for it and it's enchanting something. Awakening Zone, at the start of our upkeep, makes us another Eldrazi spawn. Bastion of Remembrance enters and makes us a 1/1 human soldier. Detective of the Month, when we get our second card, we also get a 2/2 detective. Foggy Swamp Spirit Keeper, when we draw our second card, we get a spirit creature, a 1/1 spirit that can't be blocked by or block non-spirits. Min gives us a 1/1 illusion that gets more power for each illusion we control every time we draw our second card. Scoot Swarm makes insects, and later, when we have enough lands, makes copies of itself with Landfall. Thopter Fabricator gives us a Thopter when we draw our second card. Uro is not something that makes a token. Uro enters the battlefield, and much like we saw with Shriekmaw, gets 2 triggers on the stack when it enters. If it's going to be sacrificed anyway, we might as well sacrifice it to our commander, which means Uro comes in, we're going to get this trigger whether or not we sacrifice it first, but before this trigger resolves, we sacrifice it to our commander. So that's fodder anyway, since it's going to be sacrificed on its own. Pretty good. Bayfonk's Bounty Hunters gives us terrific fodder, because it means any non-land creatures we control, when they die, we get a land that becomes a creature, which we can then sacrifice, and it will come back as a land again, thanks to Earthbending. Pretty great. Elegy Acolyte makes 2/2 robots if we were able to trigger Void during our turn at the end step. Homunculus Horde, much like our Scoots, makes copies of itself, which we can sacrifice. Invasion of Innistrad on the backside makes zombie tokens, both by entering and by letting us eat things out of graveyards to make zombie tokens. We haven't seen Wonder yet. Wonder, I think, is so cool in this deck. 3 and a blue for a 2/2 flying incarnation, so a little expensive for a Windrake. But it says, as long as this card is in your graveyard and you control an island, creatures you control have flying. So this is actually one of our finishers, one of our win cons. We get a big board full of tokens and powerful creatures. We get Wonder into the graveyard, which we do by sacrificing it generally. We're going to have an island because we have 8 islands in this deck, which doesn't seem like that many. But we're getting so many lands into play, and so much of the time we're playing lands that are dual lands, or we're fetching for lands that are dual typed. We're going to need blue mana somehow, and a lot of our blue mana sources are islands. So Wonder is going to be able to make all of our creatures fly, as long as it's in our graveyard. Pretty good. And it's in this fodder section because we want to sacrifice it, because we want it in our graveyard. Shriekmaw, same as Uro, like we discussed before. We want to sacrifice this after we evoke it. That makes it into fodder. Garruk makes wolves that when they die, put loyalty counters on Garruk. So that's pretty good fodder. Liliana makes us some zombies, and once we sacrifice them, Liliana also triggers when we draw a card. Primeval Bounty gives us beast creature tokens whenever we cast any of our 33 creature spells while it's in play. Vraska makes us menacing 2/2 black pirate creature tokens we can sacrifice. Beladros Witherbloom makes us pests. Isuri's Predation makes us 4/4 Phyrexian beasts. And one more card we haven't seen, it's Koma, Cosmos Serpent. 3 double green and double blue for a 6/6 legendary serpent that cannot be countered. And it says at the beginning of each upkeep, again, that's not just our upkeep, we make a 3/3 blue serpent creature token named Koma's Coil. We can sacrifice these if we want to our commander's ability. But we can also sacrifice any other serpent, of which we have fully 2. Good job, us. Koma and any other serpent, which includes these 3/3 tokens we're making, to either tap a permanent and its activated abilities can't be activated this turn, or to give Koma indestructible. So generally, this is what we're using these tokens for. Koma becomes a very powerful 6/6 indestructible attacker, or becomes an indestructible blocker because we're sacrificing a serpent as well. And we're getting 4 serpents every turn cycle, since we get one during each player's upkeep. So Koma's very good. I want to mention at this point, we've got a lot of cards here that look like they're quite expensive. If we wanted to look at our curve, we've got quite a few cards clustered at 2, 3, and 4, but plenty more up here above it. Looks like about 9 or 10 cards, or rather not 9 or 10, but like 14, 15 cards above 4 mana. Some of these we can bring in more cheaply, like Shriekmaw, of course, is 5 mana, but we're generally going to be evoking it, that kind of thing. We've got, this is actually, we're going to cast for 3 mana and then 8 mana. 8 mana is still a lot, though. But the reason we have these huge creatures, like Beladros and Koma, and all these 6 mana planeswalkers, is because we're in a deck that is all about ramping things out. So because we're able to ramp out so many things, or to ramp out so many lands, we need to be able to use that mana to make big splashy plays from the start as soon as we can. So we have a number of cards that are expensive and powerful that we want to be able to use that for. Getting out Primeval Bounty is going to pay us back. The same thing is true of AEC or any of these planeswalkers. Or, well, maybe not Isuri's Predation, that's going to do a lot for us on its own. But, getting out Psychosis Crawler is going to be very powerful for us. Tatiova, Sir Conrad, lots of these things are doing a lot for us, and so we push ourselves to be able to have these big expensive finisher types, this top end, if you want to think of it that way, for our deck. So that covers our fodder section. Let's talk about our synergy section. Synergy is what I'm using to represent cards that can untap our commander, and maybe more than just our commander. Like Retreat to Coralhelm. With the Landfall trigger, we can untap our commander and be able to use them again, either on our turn or maybe on someone else's turn if we can untap them then. We're running Quest for Renewal from Worldwake. This is 1 and a green for an enchantment that says whenever a creature you control becomes tapped, you may put a quest counter on this enchantment. So if we attack with 4 creatures, we get 4 counters on this. If we activate our commander, tapping them, we get a counter every time we do that. And as long as there are 4 more quest counters on Quest for Renewal, untap all creatures you control during each other player's untap step. So pretty sweet as a way for us to use our commander over and over and over on our opponent's turns, especially if we attacked with several of our little tokens and now they're tapped. We just untap them. We've got them to block during our opponent's end step. We can use them we can sacrifice one of them to our commander, then untap our commander again with Quest for Renewal on the next player's upkeep, or untap rather, pretty sweet. Or, for 1 more mana, we don't have to jump through the hoops. Unstoppable Plan from Aetherdrift is 2 and a blue for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your end step, untap all non-land permanents you control. So this is not everyone's turn, it's just ours, but it lets us get 1 more instance of untapping if we would like to do that. There are other effects that can give us essentially a sort of wilderness reclamation thing if we want to do that with our lands as well, to do another quest for renewal or retreat to Coralhelm type thing. But Unstoppable Plan giving us a single extra untap during our end step is pretty sweet for its mana value. So yeah, this is a good card that you might want to swap out for something else, but I think it's pretty helpful, and yeah, I enjoy it. So that covers our synergy section. Let's take a look at a few payoffs we have for what we're already doing. Tragic Slip pays us off because it does more, it hurts more if we've had a creature die this turn, and we're likely to have done that because of our commander. Dina pays us off because we have lots of ways, especially from our commander, to gain life, so we get to add more life loss for our opponents. Quest for Renewal, since we're tapping our commander and also attacking, we're getting ways to untap everything. Eloise, we're sacrificing a lot of things to our commander, many of which are tokens, so we're getting some surveil off of that. And Psychosis Crawler sees us drawing so many cards and causes our opponents to lose life every time we do draw one. That is our payoff section. Let's take a look at our recursion. So we've seen all these already. Bloodghast can recur itself. Normally I don't put cards that recur themselves or that do the thing to themselves rather than to other cards, rather than act as a source of recursion for us in those sections. But because Bloodghast comes back over and over and over in our deck, oftentimes as part of being sacrificed to an ability that will bring it back because it lets us draw and then put a land into play, it's worth mentioning. Gixian Puppeteer can let us bring back a creature card with mana value 3 or less, which again, we have 17 of those, including our commander. That's when it dies. And Awakening Hall, if we are to pay 8 mana for it, does bring all of our creatures back to the battlefield. So, not nothing. Appropriately, we have a finisher section as our last spell section. These are ways for us to try and push through for the win. Joriel, of course, can pump up all of our creatures based on the number of cards we have in hand. Wonder can give all of our creatures flying, which is a solid way for a go-wide deck to win. Garrett Cursed Huntsman can get an emblem that gives all of our creatures +3/+3 and trample. That's just a permanent overrun. And Vraska can make a player have a life total of 1. And I guess I could have put Liliana Dreadhorde General in here, but it doesn't really finish things for us for someone. It just puts us in a position to win. And I guess I guess you could make the case that Wonder sort of does the same thing in that way, but yeah, you understand. Do you want to put Liliana down here and finishers yourself just to have 5? You're welcome to. So that covers all of our spells. Let's take a look, as we always do, at our land base. We're running quite a low number of basics for my decks. 12. It's 5 forests, 5 swamps, and just 2 islands, because this makes our mana work out pretty great, actually. We could definitely do fewer forests and swamps and more islands if we wanted to make sure we hit Wonder, like do 4/4/4 across the board. That would be fine. But this ends up being exactly what we're looking for in terms of our mana balance. But in general, we have an awful lot of coverage for our mana, so if you want to mess with the basics in this deck and give yourself more islands for that reason, no worries. We're running 2 bicycle lands. Bicycle lands are lands that are dual typed. So Festering Thicket, for example, is a swamp and a forest. It comes in tapped, and we can cycle it for 2, meaning while it's in our hand, we can pay 2 and discard it to draw a card instead. So this is a way for us to, if we fetch a swamp or a forest, we can find Festering Thicket, and it'll come in tapped. So if we're finding this with Farseek, Farseek puts the land into play tapped anyway. We can find a swamp with Farseek, get the Festering Thicket, it'll come in tapped. It would have anyway, but now when we untap with it, it'll make green for us as well. So also true about all of the lands I'm going to mention that come in tapped is the fact that our commander, as part of her activated ability, we draw a card and we put a land from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. If Festering Thicket's in our hand, we can do that. It would have been tapped anyway, thanks to our commander's effect. So it doesn't matter that we're putting it in. It doesn't matter that it would come in tapped on its own, since the way we're putting it in puts it in tapped. You understand. But it's here in case we draw it late game and we need to cycle it for a card, or if we want to fetch for it. The same is true for Fetid Pools. It's the same as Festering Thicket in every way except that it's an island swamp, and therefore taps for blue and black. rather than a swamp forest. We're running all 3 bounce lands on our colors. Bounce lands, like Dimir Aqueduct, are lands that come in tapped, and when they do, we have to return a land we control to its owner's hand. So we bounce a land. That's why they're called bounce lands. What's great about that is even though it sort of replaces the land that was already in play, it taps for 2 mana. It doesn't say add blue or black, it says add blue and black. So we get 2 mana off of this. So normally these are pretty great lands. You play it, you maybe tap a land before you play this to get the mana out of it, and then bounce the tapped land, so you've already gotten your mana from it. And then the next turn, you know you're going to make your land drop because you have a land in hand that was already in play. And you're not behind on mana since this produces 2 mana. What's especially nice for the Dimir Aqueduct, however, is we can bounce lands that are put into play by our commander, or put the Dimir Aqueduct into play with our commander, and bounce lands that we otherwise put into play, either as our land drop and we use the mana for it, or as maybe we put it in as the first half of our commander's triggered ability because we have 8 or more lands. So Dimir Aqueduct helps us, and all the bounce lands help us do that. They do kind of hurt us in terms of being able to get up to 8 lands since they bounce something to our hand, but we have other ways to be able to get it out with things like Growth Spiral and such. So yeah, bounce lands are pretty nice for us, and I guess I should mention, since they're putting lands back in our hand, we can put them back into play, and that's even more landfall triggers that we're getting. So Dimir Aqueduct, of course, taps for Dimir mana, blue and black. Golgari Rot Farm taps for Golgari, green and black. And Simic Growth Chamber taps for Simic, green and blue. We've got 4 fixing lands, I'm calling. This is Command Tower. It's an untapped land that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, just like Arcane Signet. So it's an untapped tri-land, taps for blue, black, or green for us. Obviously, we've got to run that. That's so powerful. We have Exotic Orchard, which is an untapped land that taps for 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. So oftentimes, we're not going to be in a pod where people are only playing white, red, or white and red. But even if they are, then Exotic Orchard could make white or red mana for us, which we can use for one of our many, many generic mana costs. But if anyone's playing blue, or black, or green, goodness, everyone in Commander is playing green, it feels like. Exotic Orchard is an untapped land that's going to produce at least 1 color in the colors that we need, and oftentimes it's going to produce all 3. So even if this is an untapped dual land, it's still pretty powerful. And an untapped tri-land, which it may very well be, very nice. Especially if someone else is running an Exotic Orchard, because then Exotic Orchard taps for any color that our lands can produce. And if someone's running a 5-color land, or a land that otherwise says can tap for 1 mana of any color, maybe they're running a bunch of basics, but they have a Chromatic Lantern in play, then Exotic Orchard taps for whatever we want. Path of Ancestry is next. This is a tapped land that does the same thing as Command Tower and Arcane Signet. It adds 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, so blue, black, or green. However, a tapped tri-land is pretty good, but also if we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry 1. I think it should be obvious, our commander shares creature types with itself. It's a human and a dryad, so if we cast our commander with Path of Ancestry's mana, we will get a scry off of it. But we also have 11 other humans in the deck, and 1 other Dina, which is a dryad, as well. So that's fully 12 cards beyond our commander in our deck that will get us a scry with Path of Ancestry. Pretty good. Finally, we're running Temple of the False God. I know not everyone likes this card, but it is pretty powerful. It just limits its power early in the game. So Temple of the False God is an untapped land that taps for 2 colorless mana, just like Sol Ring. So it's a soul land. Except it's not able to be activated unless we control 4 other lands beside it. So a total of 5 or more lands, including itself. This is in this deck because we have a bunch of big things, which it's fine if we don't want to use its mana for big things. This is just a land that taps for 2 mana that doesn't require to bounce another land. So it's ramp on a land. We just can't use it early game. So if you have an opening hand that's like an island and a Temple of the False God, maybe you don't want to keep that. But if Temple of the False God is one of the lands you're putting into play tapped from our commander's activated ability, if we're getting this in growth spiraled, if we're getting this out, it's so easy for us to get up to 5 or more lands, including Temple of the False God, in this deck. So easy. And we're even running 39 total lands in this deck as opposed to the normal 38 floor. So yeah, this is just, it feels like a no-brainer to run this. We've got our Pain lands as well. Landfall Waste is going to be our example. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can tap it for one of 2 colors, black or green in this case, if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. We have a lot of life gain in this deck, but even if we didn't, oftentimes fixing our mana with an untapped land is so worth taking a damage, since we won't have to do it every single time. Most of the time with a Pain land, you're tapping it for colorless mana. So this is a land that comes in untapped and gives you whatever color you need, other than blue in this case, and you just may have to take a little damage. And if so, you're going to get it back, and even if you didn't, it's still worth paying for it, for an untapped duel. Underground River makes blue and black. Yavimaya Coast makes green or blue. And of course, the Landfall Wastes makes black or green. Pretty good for us. If you wanted to upgrade, let's talk about a little upgrading now. You could include, instead of these 3 Pain lands, the 3 Shock lands. Shock lands might come into play tapped, which is fine, because lands are going to come in tapped from some of our effects, like our Commander's activated ability anyway. And Shock lands, if they don't come in tapped, we're paying 2 mana or 2 life for that to happen, and that's the only time we're having to pay 2 life, and we're getting our mana fixed even better than with these Pain lands, because those are also typed lands. Since, like, what are we thinking? Like an Overgrown Tomb, you know, instead of Landfall Wastes, is a swamp and a forest, which means we can also fetch it. And it also works for, if we were using, you know, Breeding Pool for Yavimaya Coast, that's an island, so it works for Wonder, you know, that kind of thing. Next we have 3 Scry lands. These are the temples. Temple of Deceit, Malady, and Mystery. They all come in tapped, and when they do, they all scry 1, and then of course they tap for one of 2 colors, even though they are not a typed land. So this is a guaranteed scry, as opposed to the scries that are based on what spell we're using the mana for with Path of Ancestry. And scrying is great in this deck. It lets us manipulate the top of our library a little bit, gives us a little card selection, and also gets us to where we need to be for what we're going to be drawing, and therefore hopefully putting into play with land-wise with our commander. We could take these temples and upgrade them to the Surveil lands, which are not just the same, except that they're Surveil instead of Scry, but they also have the land types. So, yeah, I don't remember the Surveil lands well enough to give you a good example of them. But yeah, they work otherwise the same way, and we might want to do that, again, because they're typed. They're just more expensive than these, so a good upgrade. We're running 2 Tango lands, Sunken Hollow and Vernal Fen. These are typed duels, but as opposed to the Bicycle lands, they don't come in tapped if we, unless we control, or rather, I'm sorry, they do come in tapped, but if we control 2 or more basics, they don't. We've only got 12 basics in this deck, but there's a lot of chances that our lands are going to come in tapped anyway, simply because we have our commander and the way that they work. So we have a lot of ways that we're likely to get this into play tapped, just from coming in as our commander's activated ability. But if it turns out that because we've ramped so much and we've got 2 of our 12 basics in play, when Sunken Hollow is able to come in, then it's an untapped typed duel. That's pretty sweet for us. And even better is Vernal Fen, because it's an untapped typed duel forest. So if we've already got 2 basic lands in play, we can use Nature's Lore to find this and put this into play untapped. Pretty sweet. Much like our Bicycle lands, we could upgrade these into slow lands if we really wanted to. We could also do that with our Pain lands, I guess. Slow lands are likely to come into play untapped, usually a little more than the Tango lands are, because they work the same as Tango lands, but they only require 2 or more lands for them to come in untapped. So as long as they're the 3rd land or later, they come in untapped. But in this deck, these are typed lands, and we probably want that even more. And the slow lands might be coming into play untapped, or rather tapped anyway, simply because half of the time we're putting lands into play thanks to Zimone and Dina. So yeah, these are much cheaper as well. We've got Opulent Palace as our tri-land. This is a tap land that comes into play and, taps for all 3 of our colors. That's pretty good. It's not as good as our Path of Ancestry, but it's another tri-land, and it fixes our mana very well. And again, it doesn't matter if it comes into play tapped, because half of our lands are probably coming in through Zimone and Dina. If you wanted to upgrade this, you could upgrade to a Triome, which is the Zagoth Triome, which will be the same as this, except that it comes in taps for all 3 colors because it is all 3 land types, and you can cycle it for 3 generic mana. But it's a lot more money than 15 cents for the Opulent Palace. We are running all 6 of the typed duels from Kaldheim and Dominaria United in this deck. So the way these things work is all of these lands just enter tapped and are 2 land types. Contaminated Aquifer, of course, is an island and a swamp, so it taps for blue or black, but it comes in tapped. The only difference between the Dominaria ones, Contaminated Aquifer, Haunted Mire, and Tangled Islet, are that the Kaldheim ones are also snow lands, which is not relevant in this deck, so it might as well be the same thing. So what we can do with these is put them into play tapped, and we have land that is typed, which can be pretty useful for us. It's fetchable with our Rampant Growths, if you want to think of it that way. We can find Ice Tunnel with Farseek, we can find Haunted Mire with Farseek, or with Nature's Lore, since it's a forest. And all of these give us fixing, because they are going to enter tapped anyway from Zimone and Dina, so we might as well get in something that can tap for 2 colors of mana. So pretty sweet. If you wanted to side grade these, I suppose, you could go with just 1 set of them, and then a set of the gain lands, like the lands that are not typed, but come in and gain us a life. That's also fine. I went this way, but the gain lands don't cost any more than these lands. Some of them are even cheaper because they've been printed into the dirt, so that's a nice option for you as well. And finally, we've got 3 utility lands. We're looking at Bossing Say first. This is from the Avatar set. It comes in tapped unless we control a basic land. So the same thing, or a little bit better rather, than our Tango lands. It taps for green, or we can pay 2 and a green and tap it to Earthbend 2 as a sorcery, meaning we can take one of our lands, it might even be Bossing Say, and make it a 0/0 with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. It has haste, it's still a land, and when it dies or is exiled, it comes back to the battlefield tapped. So a little bit more fodder for us if we want to think of it that way. I like running Demolition Field in my decks, just a way to have a single answer to a problematic land, because I know that people don't like having their lands blown up. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic that an opponent controls. But they don't lose that. They don't lose out on land. They get to look for a basic, put it on the battlefield untapped, and then shuffle. And so do we. So neither player is down a land. It's just, unless of course they didn't have any basics left in their library, which in our deck, I guess is a possibility if we've ramped all 12 of them into play. But Demo Field makes it so that both players generally still have the same number of lands in play. It's just whatever problematic Glacial Chasm or Rogue's Passage or Maze of Ith or whatever that they were running is no longer around to bother us. Finally, we're running Fountain Port. Fountain Port is just bonus utility for us. It's an untapped land that taps for colorless. We can pay 2 and tap it and sack a token, of which we have many, to draw a card. We can pay 3, tap it, and pay a life to make a token, a 1/1 blue fish creature token. Or if we've got some extra mana lying around at the end of our turn, which oftentimes we will, once we've ramped a whole lot of lands into play, we can pay 4 and tap it to make a treasure and just bank one of those mana. So Fountain Port gives us a lot of good options, and at the very least, comes in untapped and makes mana for us. Pretty sweet. And that about sums it up. Again, I'm making a new deck every Monday, or I'm releasing a new deck every Monday for each of the March of the Machine Legends. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific commander or style of deck, and I'll put it together. Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe. Remember to ring the bell if you want to be alerted when I post videos, which is not infrequently. And remember most of all that magic is fun. You should play more Magic.